Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the first part thereof for the 30th of October 2025. Before we get into the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before, worth noting that it was a really terrible night for Ukraine last night. They had massive numbers of drones and missiles flooding the Ukrainian skies. Real heavy night attack again. It is something we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about those figures and what it means in terms of production. We'll come to that later. Just while I have you here, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. All that stuff I usually forget to say because I get so into it, but apparently this is what YouTubers do. So please, if you can, like, subscribe, and share. That will be absolutely phenomenal. Right, let's go on with the stats. Okay, the Ukrainian General Staff figures here for the Russian losses, all the usual caveats apply. You can find them linked in the description below. There are 960 personnel lost, so that's under 1,000, but still fairly significant. 2 tanks, 3 armoured combat vehicles, fairly typical in those categories, fairly low. 25 artillery systems is around about the average. What is the average at the moment? I do have the stats. I was going to look at some drone stats in a wee while, as you can see here, ready for you. But the average for, where do we have it? These are Dell stats that he so lovingly curates on a daily basis. Thanks so much for him for doing that. Artillery losses, the mean average is 25.28, so bang on the average there. The 7-day rolling average, 21.57, 30-day rolling average, 25.93. So this last month has been pretty average, I guess, just marginally above average. So that is worth looking at on a regular basis to get our understanding of what the averages are, to benchmark. Okay, so we have 1 multiple launch rocket system, 2 air defense systems. That's going to be fairly useful for the Ukrainians, and 128 vehicles and fuel tanks. So large losses of unarmored vehicles there for the Ukrainians, losses for the Russians. We're going to talk a bit later about the numbers on this sheet. Like I've said to you before, do not quite marry up with the numbers on the overnight missile and drone sheets. So, huge numbers there, but they don't quite tally if you add up the two numbers, because the cutoff is halfway through the night. If you add up the two numbers from the blue sheets for the consecutive nights, and then you work out from the green sheets, there are way more on these green sheets. And we'll talk in a second about how that there's often quite a significant difference, and it really gives you an indication that there are many, many more drones used in the daytime, not just one-way attack drones like Shaheds and their Talmas, but also things like reconnaissance drones and Lancets and whatnot. So these numbers are really significant on a very consistent basis. But before we get there, let's look at some equipment losses here. We have the Ukrainian border guards destroying 3 Russian electronic warfare vehicles in the south somewhere. This is very useful for the Ukrainians, obviously, because these will give capabilities to the Russians for spotting and jamming drones and whatnot. I always find it somewhat ironic that you have electronic warfare vehicles and pieces of equipment getting blown up by the very things they're supposed to jam. But of course, they will operate on certain frequencies, and the Ukrainians, when they have the capabilities, will have drones that can, not all drones do this, but some of the better drones will be able to channel hop and move to frequencies where they can hit something that is otherwise attempting to jam them. And then we have a Russian Osa surface-to-air missile system being taken out by the Ukrainian Southern Defense Forces, so in the south somewhere again. Another useful hit there, as an air defense system is destroyed by the looks of it. I don't think that's going to be operating anytime soon. Okay, moving on to something that I sort of mentioned over the last couple of days. We had 2 days or 2 sets of videos concerning separate huge, scare quotes huge, because actually compared to earlier in the war, they're fairly modest, but huge mechanized attacks for this stage of the war that took place around Pokrovsk, Myrnohrad, that kind of area. And the Ukrainians did and actually northeast of there in Shakova area, the Ukrainians did an amazing job of repelling these attacks. But even if they seem to decimate the Russian attacks, the Russians often get a chance to deliver troops to where they're trying to get to. Even if 90% of their convoy is destroyed, that 10% can still make a difference. So the Eurominded press talks about this. 14 Russian vehicles broke through at Pokrovsk. Half the force was destroyed. Half, though, survived. Turns out that when tanks get armored enough, they flip the math. Drones work until you run out of them. They are no Wunderwaffe after all. So it's quite a not damning indictment, but this is a realistic appraisal of the limits of drones, because I talked to you previously about these Mad Max style tank and armored personnel carrier setups where they just cover them in sheet metal, but even like branches and chains and all sorts of crazy stuff. But they are functionally useful. I showed you that video the other day, probably a week ago now, where it took 25 drones and mines to stop one of these vehicles with a mine roll on the front, but covered with all that paraphernalia. 25 drones and mines to stop that thing. These vehicles are now sucking up the drones, and it's becoming more and more difficult to stop them. So the end of Ukraine's Wunderwaffe drones, Russian turtle tanks eat FPVs as 14 vehicles break through. A large Russian tank force, says Eurominded Press, attacked under the cover of bad weather on Monday. Half the force survived, and that might be enough. 29 Russian vehicles attacked north of Pokrovsk. So this is a Shakova attack. Half survived, potentially through enough to land a substantial infantry force. It's possible up-armored turtle tanks were the key to the high survival rate. Turtle tanks can shrug off drones, helping Russian assault groups get through. And this is what I was saying at the time, that you need artillery, I think, to punch through these things. Like a shell with all that kinetic force landing on top of these vehicles is going to do enough damage. But the problem is these vehicles are moving. It is difficult to hit these vehicles with artillery, and that's why you need so much artillery still working on these vehicles. We might be going back to the power of artillery, given that drones are struggling to take out these vehicles in a way that they did earlier in the war. So just to give you some details here, a clutch of Ukrainian brigades, including the 33rd and 93rd Brigades, mechanized brigades, assisted by the 1st Azov Corps and the unmanned systems forces, knocked out more than half of the vehicles with mines, drones, and artillery, and scattered the infantry who managed to dismount. Losing half of the battalion-sized assault group would be catastrophic for any other military, but for the Russian military, it may actually represent a victory of sorts. It's possible enough infantry survived the assault to find cover positions and create a lodgement for eventual reinforcements. If those reinforcements arrive in time, the Russians may be able to consolidate their new positions and create opportunities for future advances. Of course, this is what they've been doing routinely throughout the war. The difference here is that the mechanized vehicles are now up-leveled, upgraded to, I mean, they look ridiculous oftentimes, but to become these vehicles that are much more difficult to stop. Quote, the levels of success from this attack will become clearer in the coming days, AMK mapping noted. Now, that is a pro-Russian mapper, it has to be said. I think it's a New Zealand mapper that has gone more over to the dark side since the beginning of the war. Anyway, the Monday assault apparently involved some of the five Russian Marine brigades and regiments that rushed towards Pokrovsk this summer. Was one of the most massive in recent times, the 1st Azov Corps reported. The assault targeted Ukrainian positions northeast of Pokrovsk, where the Russians are struggling to hold on to a salient they carved out of Ukrainian lines in August. That salient bending northwest toward the village of Dobropilya is, or was, until recent Ukrainian counterattacks, Russia's best chance to encircle Pokrovsk from the north. If or when Pokrovsk falls, and by the way, it's looking bad at the moment, the Russian center grouping of forces will have a clearer path towards Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, the last major free cities in Donetsk. So notably, according to the first Azov Corps, there was an unusually large number of up-armored turtle tanks among the 29 Russian vehicles that rolled out on Monday. Tanks often lead Russian mechanized assaults, absorbing first-person view drones with their add-on armor, clearing mines with their front-mounted rollers, and firing their cannons to suppress Ukrainian troops. The enemy tried to complicate the actions of the defense forces of Ukraine by advancing the equipment in small groups, 4 or 5 units, along different routes and at different times, the first Azov Corps stated. The invaders also counted on adverse weather conditions, which would complicate the work of drones. Despite this, their plan was thwarted. 15 of the 29 vehicles were immobilized, according to first Azov Corps. But perhaps the large proportion of tanks in the assault 14 vehicles weren't immobilized, and they may have dropped off their infantry passengers in new positions. It's possible the tanks ate so many drones that there weren't enough drones left over to hit the other armored vehicles trailing behind the tanks, as well as the infantry that they landed. Quote, the clearing of the enemy infantry landing sites continues, first Azov Corps reported. But if Ukrainian drones and counter-assaults can't clear out these infantry, it could become a problem for the Ukrainian defense north of Pokrovsk. Experts warned something like this could happen, quote, and this is analyst Jompy, who does a lot of adding up of the deep storage of Soviet era vehicles and equipment. Quote, for those mocking armored vehicles and especially turtle tanks and thinking drones are a Wunderwaffe that have rendered armor obsolete, take a look at the sheer amount of FPVs that are required to destroy a well-up armored tank. There are recent examples of Russian turtle tanks shrugging off dozens of drones before succumbing. Quote, it's not about how many dollars a tank costs versus a drone, Jompy added. It's about how many targets drone-intensive defenses can take out before being overwhelmed. I read the whole of that because I think that is really important to understand. When we see these huge armored attacks take place, and we see eventually these vehicles get hammered, like, it's how many drones and mines that these are absorbing before they actually have an effect and stop the initial tanks. But then, you know, how many other vehicles coming from behind are able to then achieve their objective. Now, talking about Pokrovsk, this is a Kyiv Independent reporting that Russian soldiers have advanced further into the city of Pokrovsk, threatening not only to take the city, but to complete a larger encirclement of the surrounding area, as independent analysts and commanders report a serious deterioration of the Ukrainian position in the area. So it is looking very bad, I think, for Ukraine holding on to Pokrovsk and Mechanized. Andrew Perpetua was talking about why the Ukrainians are even holding on to Mechanized, thinking that actually they should have pulled out from there. Yeah, very precarious, although the Ukrainians are doing a good job northeast of Pokrovsk, and they do have defenses. I mean, the difference between Bakhmut, or the difference between Avdiivka, say, and Pokrovsk is that there are defenses built into the grounds north and further back from Pokrovsk, going on for, you know, I presume tens of kilometers. That wasn't the case with Avdiivka. The Ukrainians had not been thoughtful enough to. I just don't think they're expecting to lose Avdiivka as quick as they did, or at all even. So they didn't bother building these defensive lines. And of course, that was the onslaught of, or the oncoming of, these guided glide bombs, Avdiivka. And that was what precipitated the very quick fall of Avdiivka. They've got used to guided glide bombs, but they still are the scourge and need to do something about that for sure. You know, for me, it's like Yelabuga needs to be destroyed 100%. I don't understand why that is still standing. You know, you could argue that all of these attacks on refineries have been so damned useful for Ukraine. Well, if they'd accumulated all of those drones and missiles and thrown them at Yelabuga and completely overwhelmed Yelabuga, then Yelabuga wouldn't be standing still, and they wouldn't be receiving hundreds and hundreds of drones as they do on a nightly basis, which is destroying so much of their infrastructure, the Ukrainian infrastructure. Anyway, it's really difficult for the Ukrainians. So yeah, I was going to say Yellowbuga and air bases where they are able to take off with these jets and drop these guided glide bombs to the tune of hundreds a day. Okay, but moving on, I want to show you this absolutely incredible bit of footage. A sizable explosion on this FPV drone, but it's a fiber optic drone that allows you to go underground and not lose signal. And just look at how this drone is able to overcome the obstacles there. Well, just get through an opening into a dugout and then go down the corridor over that X of wood there that I presume is trying to stop drones like this, maybe, while still allow troops to walk through, or maybe they're just structural. But anyway, that goes to show the usefulness of fiber optic drones. That's going to be the same, of course, for both sides. Don't just think that that's, oh, what a wonderful video of Ukraine succeeding with fiber optic drones. We know the Russians have, well, traditionally have had more fiber optic drones. They were the ones that innovated fiber optics first. Here we have an AASM hammer airstrike. So these are guided glide bombs. In this case, absolutely hammering supposedly a Russian base. I can't confirm that, but if that was a Russian base, it's looking like it's in quite a bit of trouble. These AASM hammer guided glide bombs appear to be very, very capable munitions. They're expensive though. French ramped up their production of these and ramped up the number. Initially, they were giving 50 a month to the tune of 600, and then that was it. But then they've continued giving them, and I think they're giving more of them as well. But you know, even at 50 a month, that's a couple a day tops, isn't it? So when the Russians are dropping sometimes 200 to 300 guided glide bombs on a daily basis, you know, a couple of AASM hammers are it's just not a comparison. But you know, my position has been very well documented. I've said it enough. Ukraine needs 70 more planes and all the munitions to go with them, and they need to be ramping up, scaling up their own production of guided glide bombs. They need to be producing their own guided glide bombs and dropping them by the bucket load on Russian forces on the front line. Here we have pretty impressive footage of a MiG-29 launching AGM-88 HARM anti-radar missiles. Hopefully, I just find this, you know, just quite stat. I could show you plenty of these bits of footage on a daily basis, but sometimes it's just interesting to see this stuff and how quickly those missiles. I mean, that jet's already flying at quite a clip, and those missiles are off. So those are designed to take out targets that are emitting radar radar signatures. So if you have an anti-aircraft radar air defense radar system, then they will hunt them out and blow them up, and that's what that plane's doing. So, talking about guided glide bombs, Russia continues to bomb its own citizens. Astra has revealed the 127th bomb of the year in Belgorod region. Happened 10 days ago. The 500-kilogram aerial bomb hit the village of Krasnaya Polyana near Shebekino. Astra says this one didn't explode, but when people are killed, they dress it up as a Ukrainian attack. So when it doesn't explode, they say, "Oh, this Russian bomb, well, this went wrong, and sorry about that." But hey, no one died. And then when they do land and explode, they're like, "Ah, damn those Ukrainians for bombing this village in the middle of nowhere." So there you go. I thought that was worth sharing. Oh, look at that. In Simferopol on occupied Crimea, a cargo truck careered off a bridge and onto the railway lines below. It happened next to the railway station. The lorry driver was injured but survived. Anything like that's useful for stopping logistics on both the road and the railway there. So thank you to that lorry driver. We have another video from the GUI here, the military intelligence not dictating, exhibiting all of these partisan bits of activity inside Russia, destroying enemy communication facilities on the territory, cellular towers, communication equipment. Local mobile operators continue to catch fire throughout Russia. Now, many of these I'm sure I would have shown you individually, but it just goes to show how much activity is actually taking place inside Russia. It's not just relay cabinets for the railway, but also you're seeing mobile phone towers, communication hubs, so on and so forth, catching fire due to what the Russians themselves are doing as partisans, sabotaging their own comms and logistics and whatnot. So that's really, really useful. That's a full 2-minute video there showing stuff burning inside Russia. Now, I talked to you the other day about this crane, this crane boat, floating crane system, a PK400 in Sevastopol that was still under construction at the Sevastopol marine plant, had been for 8 years, but now it's no more. Ultimately, the Russian shipbuilders capsized the crane and sank it, never completing its construction. It led to, I think, several workers perishing and a number of them being injured here, but it's quite a bit of footage, this. So we saw the images of it already on its side. That's the whole floating part there, and the crane going out onto the water, and obviously don't quite worked out the balance there. And I mean, really, for a floating crane to have that far of a reach out into water, as you can see there, it doesn't at all surprise me that's going to do that. Seems to be well overreaching there. If you got something pretty heavy, yeah, you would have thought they would have worked out the physics there, but clearly they haven't, and that's the end of that. So good stuff for the Ukrainians. Any kind of harm to Russia's shipping, port infrastructure in occupied territories is a good thing for Ukraine, right? Okay, moving on to the horrific night last night for strikes inside Ukraine. Zelensky said the enemy used more than 650 drones and more than 50 missiles of various types, including ballistics and aeroballistics. Many were shot down, but unfortunately, there are hits. Ordinary residential buildings in Zaporizhzhia were damaged. There is destruction of a dormitory. Well, actually, I think, realistically speaking, a lot of energy infrastructure has been hit overnight. Good news is that we'll come to that. Okay, so first of all, how many drones? 653 drones were sent. 592 were shot down. So it's not too bad an interception rate considering the sheer volume of drones sent. Then we have how many missiles in total? 30, 40, 47, 51, 52 missiles in total. 21 out of the 30 KH-101 missiles were shot down or intercepted. Caliber cruise missiles, 7 out of the 8. They seem to be much easier to shoot down. 2 out of the 2 KH-69, 59-69 missiles were intercepted. So that's good because they are, as I understand it, stealth missiles. So they should be harder to shoot down, and they got both of them. 1 out of the 2 Iskander-K cruise missiles was shot down. None of the Iskander-K ballistic missiles. 5 were shot, none of them were intercepted. 4 Kinzhal aeroballistic missiles were shot, none shot down. So all 9 ballistic missiles got through, and I'm thinking they probably hit to the west. I don't know what the range is, though, on them, to be perfectly frank. Certainly the Kinzhals, I would have thought, would have been going for energy infrastructure in the west. And you've got KH-31P, is that an anti-ship missile? Very difficult to shoot down, I think, as well. That got through too. So the figures are, I mean, that's going to be a really horrible night for Ukraine. Some 60 drones got through, 61 drones out of, that's correct, isn't it? 53 and 8. Yeah, 61 drones there. Getting through out of the 653, so that's just about a 90, just over 90% interception rate, and then an awful lot of missiles getting through. Worrying stuff. So what I want to do first of all is just look at here the stats for, and I'm going to show you down here towards the bottom. You've got UAV plus. These stats are drawn from the green general staff figures. This area up here, 340, is what was reported yesterday over the last 24 hours. And these will differ from the blue sheets that only count the overnight strikes. And for example, we have just seen this. Let's try and find it for you. Horrific imagery coming from Sumy that has just happened. Here we have, this is an Italmus drone that's just slammed this morning into a petrol station. That's a war crime straight away there. Coming down terminal phase. So it looks to me like that is intentional. That's not being sent awry by electronic warfare. It's not taken out by air defenses. That is slamming purposefully into a gas station, a petrol station in Sumy. Now, luckily, no one, as far as I know, has died there, which is a minor miracle. 2 people were injured, 4 cars, I think, taken out there. But just incredible. So anyway, the point is that that's being done during the daytime. So these figures that you see are all drones, one-way attack drones, operational tactical drones. So you're going to see Lancets, Supercams, Zalas, Orlands, Orlan 10s, Orlan 30s, all sorts of different drones that aren't just your FPV drones. I don't know if it includes Baba Yaga style, like larger octocopters and whatnot. But there are many more drones in these numbers than there are in the blue sheet numbers, right? Now, I have been saying that so yesterday and the day before and the day before that, there weren't massive numbers of drones sent. As in, well, okay, so we had 100 a couple of nights ago. It was 100 and something yesterday, and then 3 nights ago, I think it was something like 36, right? And so I was saying, look, oh, this is interesting. So either they're stockpiling, or the Ukrainians have been able to damage the production chain for these drones. But why are they only sending 36 in one night? Now, if they're stockpiling, it means they can't send 150 every single night and send 650 once in a while, right? So I suppose the only silver lining at the moment is that sometime back the Russians were claiming, or the Ukrainians were claiming of the Russians, that they were going to be producing 500 a day and send 500 a day. We haven't seen that in terms of the nightly figures, but the daily figures are much higher. So the nightly figures, I've been like, oh, look, only 36 here. So are they stockpiling? Probably, but also it looks like they are certainly struggling to produce what we were worrying they were going to be able to produce at this stage. So there was talk about 500 to 1,000 drones every day were going to be produced at Yelabuga. So I'm fairly sure that Ukraine has managed to do something about the drone production. But why Yelabuga is still standing, I just don't know. I don't understand, because we know they can hit that. They do have the ability to hit that. There has been the odd drone that's hit Yelabuga. It's not done anything particularly damaging to it, but it's a kind of proof of concept, right? So you can hit Yelabuga. Why is it still freaking standing? And it appears that they are prioritizing hitting refineries over Yelabuga, which I get, totally bringing the Russian economy to its knees. But at the same time, it still allows Yelabuga to build enough drones to cause immense damage to Ukraine's energy infrastructure. As Zelensky said yesterday or the day before, Shahids are almost more problematic than missiles, because they do significant damage and there's enough of them. So then going back to these stats here, just going from just randomly this month, October the 1st, 249, 271, 273, 450, 320, 336, 338, 401, 328, 254, 219, 244, 232, 390, 389, 416. So I'm wondering if, you get these periods where there are fewer, 328, 254, 219, 244, 232. And then suddenly you get this dark red patch: 390, 389, 416, 588, 498, 444, 398. So there, and that's a significant set of numbers in the middle of that row there. Then we go 235, 160, drops fairly precipitously. And then you get this last week: 626, 440, 359, 214, 547, 108, 313, 340. And tomorrow's is going to be huge, right? So the green sheet for tomorrow and the drone numbers is going to reflect last night's massive attack, right? These are huge numbers. So you know, they do include other drones outside of the Shahed, Gerberat, Italmas kind of one-way attack drones. So take that into account. But it also shows that Russia is carrying out these drone attacks throughout the days, particularly up in the northern areas, the Sumy, Chernihiv regions, where they are receiving just regular hammering from one-way attack drones. Okay, so then let's look at the map that shows where these drones and missiles were aiming for, and the answer is freaking everywhere. Goodness me! So Zaporizhzhia, Dnipropetrovsk, right along the front line, cities of Kramatorsk, Sloviansk, etc., etc. You have Poltava, which gets routinely hammered. You have this area. I'm not sure what that area is. Maybe someone can tell me, but that there's something going on here, right? And I don't know if that is energy infrastructure or their air bases, but to the east of Kiev, some serious targeting going on there. You've got quite a lot of these missiles coming from the north, coming down. I think a number of them going for that area, and then coming through here and aiming for the west. So you have Lviv. No, you've got around Lviv. You've got Ivano-Frankivsk. This was definitely targeted. So there's Lviv there, I think. But yeah, somewhere between Lutsk and Lviv, there is somewhere that has been targeted as well. And then a couple of places on the way. Don't often see places in what would otherwise be a much safer area near the Moldova border being taken out. And then a few drones at Odessa. Looks like a single missile was sent onto the, I don't know, actually, I was going to say the Danube River Delta, but that's further south than there, I think. So I don't know where that was aimed at. So that could be something like an air defense installation or something. I don't know. But anyway, just massive attack last night. An awful lot of missiles. As you can see, some of these missiles sent from the Black Sea area. These would be the calibers, I would have thought, sent from the ships in the Novorossiysk direction. Quite a few of these got shot down, the calibers, didn't they? Assuming that's what they are. Yeah, and a few other missiles sent here to Zaporizhzhia. So yeah, that looks fairly challenging. I'd imagine these are ballistic missiles then that hit Zaporizhzhia, and then you've got some of these other almost certainly ballistic missiles here, as I said, going towards the west, although I think one ends up going into this area here. I'm just trying to see if it's dog legs. If I can, yep. Oh no, it didn't. No, it's gone right down to whatever that place is. So there you go. That's a map for you of what has happened overnight with regard to the Russian strikes. As no report says, main targets were gas and energy infrastructure in Vinnytsia. Ah, that's Vinnytsia there. That's what that is. That's Vinnytsia. Pretty sure. Yes. Ivano-Frankivsk, Lviv, Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk, and Poltava regions. So the Lviv region, not Lviv itself, but the Lviv region, they're getting hammered in the west. We have Tim White saying there was another big attack on Ukraine's energy sector, with DTEC saying thermal power plants in various regions were hit. They say it's a third massive attack on the company's thermal power plants in October. Various missiles and drones were fired by Russia. Ah, here we go. Right, nice translation. So, although it didn't tell us what's up here, but that is, I think, Vinnytsia. You've got Chernihiv up in the north there, and that's the place there. Charity. I don't know. Yeah, Charity. Okay. And Vinnytsia there getting hit. Look at the sheer mass of these yellow lines. Absolutely insane. And oh no, Vinnytsia is down here. Oh, I do apologize. So you got Ladishin, and yeah, so I'm not sure what that place is up in to the east of. I got my geography wrong there. To the east of Lviv, Kiev. I'm sure someone will let me know in the thread. Right. Okay. So you saw from the missile map earlier in today's thread, says Tim White, that Ivano-Frankivsk was very heavily attacked. It seems that both Brishtin and Kalush thermal power plants were hit with fires after big explosions. Residents are also warned about potential unexploded cluster munitions and are urged to take care. So many of these videos that come out don't show you the actual thing on fire because you get in trouble for uploading them. So they either blur them out or you just have the video cut to seeing the smoke above. Russia struck the Dobrotvir thermal power plant in Lviv region, causing damage to critical infrastructure and sparking a fire. So it seems like there are 3 power plants that have been hit, according to Lviv City Council member Ihor Zinkovich. And Zaporizhzhia came under a combined missile and drone attack overnight. At least 20 attack drones and 8 missiles. A dormitory and infrastructure facilities were partially destroyed. 1 person may still be trapped under the rubble. Rescue operations are still ongoing. And here we have that same building from a different angle. Rescuers have recovered a man's body from rubble in Zaporizhzhia. The search continues. So far, 17 people are confirmed injured, including a 2-year-old girl and 5 other children, because Russia, according to the regional administration. And then we see here rescuers digging out 1 more body from the debris after the Russian attack on the city. 2 people were killed by Russia in Zaporizhzhia today. Deepest condolences, says Anton Gerashchenko. As far as, and I don't have it here. So what we heard was that due to the massive attack on the energy infrastructure in Ukraine, that they had, very hardcore energy restrictions that were immediately in place, like blackouts every hour, like forced blackouts, I think, every hour. They've actually stopped that now, which is seems to be a good indication that they have got on top of the energy crisis already, which is very significant, I would say. And that's good news for the Ukrainians, at least. So while Ukrainian drones were striking oil depots, so this was from 2 nights ago now, so I'm rewinding a little bit. The Russians hit a children's hospital in Kherson. So 2 nights ago, Russians took out or attacked a children's hospital because Russia. Among the injured are 3 medical workers who sustained blast injuries and wounds of varying severity. In total, 9 people were injured in the attack, including 4 children. It's just unconscionable. Russia's world's largest terrorist organization, Zelensky said after the Russian strike hit a children's hospital in Kherson. This is the sort of thing that should be on all American, Fox News, just showing you what Russia does on a nightly basis. The attack injured medical staff and young patients, including an 8-year-old boy. Quote, Russia deliberately targets civilians and undermines every effort to end this war, was the quote. And then, as I've mentioned, this is a moment a drone hit this morning, the middle of Sumy, or somewhere very residential, a petrol station there. Just shocking. Right. Ukraine was active last night. There were quite a few drones, not as many as the night before, but it seems like they were attempting to have some impact last night with drones. Very little information coming out, I have to say. So I don't know what the outcome was. No reports said, I think this was last night. Yeah. Multiple Russian regions report drone threats tonight. A powerful explosion was heard in Sverdlovsk in occupied Crimea. That's where the oil depot was already struck the night before, followed by air raid sirens in Simferopol airport. Russian channels confirmed drone activity over Crimea, Rostov, Donetsk, Luhansk, Voronezh, and Bryansk. So all fairly close to Ukraine. So all of these areas here, Rostov, Crimea, Voronezh, and obviously, Bryansk, Belgorod, Kursk, these sort of areas too. But I really don't know anything at the moment as to what was hit last night. Let's see if there's any further claims from Russia No, I don't think there is. Just general. No, no, nothing I can see. So, real sort of radio silence on whether anything was hit in Russia or not. It could be that all of those drones were shot down or intercepted in different ways. Okay, we have a claim here about Kupiansk. Russian propaganda claims that the blockade of Ukrainian, not Kupiansk, Pokrovsk, troops in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk are not true, says General Syrskyi. Enemy infantry is accumulating in the city, avoiding open battles and hiding in residential buildings, moving to new positions. The primary task is to destroy such accumulations. Okay, so that's a little bit of a claim from Syrskyi concerning Pokrovsk. Anyway, back to distant strikes. One night, 3 big targets. So again, this is 2 nights ago. I just wanted to add a gas processing plant to what we knew of the night before. So we knew that Marisk refinery was hit, Novopasky refinery was hit, Budyonovsky gas processing plant I wasn't aware of. So that was hit. Marisk refinery, the plant produces 10 types of petroleum products. Processing capacity reaches 1.6 million tons of oil per year. So not the biggest, but significant still. Novopasky refinery produces the main types of oil products, such as diesel fuel, gasoline, and fuel oil. Plant's capacity is 0.6 million tons of oil per year, so a much smaller one there. Budanovsky GPP gas power plant has a design capacity, or processing plant has a design capacity of 2.2 billion cubic meters of gas per year, and that was hit, but I don't know what the damage there was. Anyway, the monitoring channel Crimean Wind reported yesterday that it wasn't the combined heat and power plant in Simferopol, and I did say this later on in the day, that was hit, but the nearby oil depot. And yesterday, military fuel trucks covered with camouflage nets and drone protection were actively entering and leaving the oil depot that is now on fire. So it's the oil depot there in Simferopol that was yesterday burning. I don't know if it still is. In fact, here it looks, this is what it looks like according to the firm's NASA firm's data. A powerful heat signature illuminating an entire neighborhood in the suburban village of Komsomolskoye, where the TES gas station chain's oil depot is located. And that'll be a petrol station, so that'll be petrol reserves for their petrol stations, I presume, across Crimea. That has been hit. And then another oil refinery in Russia has been closed. The Syrskyi oil refinery announced a temporary shutdown of some production capacity. Industry sources note that the refinery is also experiencing problems with product sales and is reducing refining volumes. Good news for Ukraine again. And I'm going to leave you on this section with Peter van der Voorde giving us some great information on substations. I asked about substations yesterday. How easy are they to knock out? How long would it take? You know, what are the vulnerable parts, etc., etc. And Peter here has obliged ATP Geo. There are 3 critical components at the switch station. 1, the external high voltage switches outside near the transformer of the 500 kilovolt power lines. 2, regulators for the external HV switches inside a building. 3, transformers. And then 4, lower voltage switches inside a building to regulate where that LV power has to go. 1 is easy to replace if damaged, so that external high voltage switches, easy to replace if damaged. 2 is easy to replace, but the building damage may take some time, so the regulators for the external HV switches inside a building. 3 are harder to replace, these transformers, but given the number of used transformers, you will need quite a few precise hits. 4 is a nightmare if damaged. So these are the lower voltage switches inside a building to regulate what LV power has to go to, or where that LV power has to go to. That's a nightmare if damaged. Even a minor fire inside a building with black smoke carbon will cause complete destruction of the installation. A precise hit will sufficiently destroy the building and installation to take it offline for at least a month. I've worked on a Polish installation made in the USSR in the 90s, and it had item number 2 and number 4 in the same room without any physical separation. So 2 and 4 here, regulators for the external HV switches inside a building and lower voltage switches inside a building to regulate blah, blah, blah. So he said, I've worked on Soviet era ones, actual Soviet ones, and 2 and 4 were in the same building and not separated, meaning no fire or blast barrier between them. My ex-professional suggestion: hit the building with the switches. It probably looks less spectacular, but it guarantees a week's, if not month-long outage. So anyway, really useful. Thank you for that. I love the fact that there's so many kind of experts with experience and something to say in the thread. So thank you for that. Right. Okay. Moving on to other bits and pieces. This made my blood boil. A British military instructor switched from training Ukrainian soldiers to spying for Russia, according to Ukraine's security service. He arrived in January 2024 and worked in Mykolaiv with a border guard unit. But by September, he was advertising his services in pro-Kremlin internet groups looking for cash. The suspect handed over coordinates of Ukrainian training centers where he had personally taught recruits, passed information about other foreign instructors he knew, was preparing a terrorist attack by collecting explosives making instructions from his handlers. Ukraine's SPU caught him in Kiev, and he now faces up to 12 years in prison. I'd say lock him up and throw away the key. It just makes my blood boil that someone could do that to Ukraine after sort of switching sides, apparently for financial reasons. Now, North Korea and Russia are rapidly building their first road bridge to enhance logistics and expand military and economic ties, says Front Intelligence Insight, analyzing satellite imagery and project documents to estimate its completion and potential impacts. There's a thread here. Today, Russia and North Korea have no direct road connection. The only land crossing is a 1950s era Korea-Russia Friendship Railroad Bridge. Air and maritime routes via Pyongyang Airport and ports like Ryazan exist, but their capacity and costs are often suboptimal. In the summer of 2024, Russia confirmed plans to build a road bridge over the Tumen River, with construction led by Russia's Tunnel Yuzhstroy. The project is budgeted at around $110 million, spanning 4.7 kilometers in total, with the bridge itself about 1 kilometer long. Both countries are building entry ports with border control and customs zones. The North Korean side appears ahead with a complex of buildings likely intended for administrative storage and inspection functions to manage cargo and passenger flows. On the Russian side, the Kherson checkpoint with 5 lanes is planned, 2 for the cargo, 1 for oversized vehicles, 1 for buses and 1 for cars. Initial capacity is 300 vehicles per day. So that's 109,500 a year, expandable to 800 per day or 292,000 a year. Cargo trucks are prioritized, expected to account for 200 to 300 daily vehicles. Passenger traffic is capped at 2,850 people per day. For context, Zaporizhzhia checkpoint in the China-Russia border handled just 440 vehicles per day in 2024. At the current pace, barring severe weather-related delays, the bridge and its supporting infrastructure are expected to be completed by mid-2026, indicating that the project remains on schedule. We assess that North Korea's trade with Russia is unlikely to suddenly surge, whether measured against either country's GDP or their share of overall exports, given the limited range of mutually sought goods, North Korea's purchasing power, and its relatively small population. In short, the bridge will boost Russian-North Korean economic and military cooperation and provide Pyongyang more leverage with Beijing, but it's unlikely to alter the regional balance or challenge China as North Korea's dominant trade partner. Russia is likely to continue its barter of resources and technology for people, receiving both workers and soldiers, while Korean cheap labor won't solve Russia's workforce shortage. It could provide limited relief and support both infrastructure and military projects. So it's an interesting thread there from Tatarigami. So that's good stuff, or bad stuff, really. This is another challenge for Ukraine, because this will be a way, although it's not functional yet, this will be a way that Russia can receive much needed resources from North Korea. Now, talking of Russia's economic situation, there are more indicators of the ongoing Russian economic collapse, says Maria Drutska. According to Rosstat, so that's Russia's own statistics organization, which will be painting things as positively as possible, so it's going to be worse than what they say, which has been caught manipulating statistics to improve them. 80% of industry is in recession. So if Rostat are coming out and saying, well, 80% of our industry is in recession, then it's probably going to be more than 80% is in recession. And that is not good news. Sberbank says loan defaults are rising fast and will keep rising, and the plummet continues. So just a couple of articles there to give you further indications of Russia's economic demise. Now, President Trump has met with Xi Jinping and said that on a scale of 0 to 10, the meeting was a 12 out of 10. So Trump obviously really liked it, which probably means that he felt he came out well, but the reality is probably he was manipulated by Xi, and he's probably given up. He's thrown Ukraine to the dogs and used them as leverage to get more out of China or something. I don't know. But anyway, President Trump and Ukraine said Ukraine was discussed during his meeting with Xi Jinping. Ukraine came up very strongly. He said, we talked about it for a long time, and we're both going to work together to see if we can get something done. He's going to help us, and we're going to work together on Ukraine. There's not a lot more we can do. He's been buying oil from Russia for a long time and takes care of a big part of China. And, I can say India's been very good on that front, but we don't really discuss the oil. We didn't really discuss the oil. We discussed working together to see if we could get that war finished. In other words, there was no pressure from Trump on China to stop using and importing Russian hydrocarbons. That appears to be the outcome here. That's poor. And the problem with the US working with China on Ukraine's future is that Trump doesn't give a shit about Ukraine, and nor does China. As in, it's not fighting for Ukraine. It's providing Russia with all sorts of resources to help Russia prevail. So essentially, Trump said, look, I can't negotiate with Putin over the future of Ukraine. In other words, I can't throw Ukraine to the dogs with Putin because that relationship's gone south. So I'm going to go and throw Ukraine to the dogs with Xi Jinping instead. That's how I read this. I don't think this is good news at all. So not good news in my opinion. So Kyiv Independent here says, Trump says Xi agrees to work together with the US on ending Russia's war in Ukraine. We agree the sides are locked and fighting, but Xi is going to help us, and we're going to work together on Ukraine. Translated means Xi is going to help us screw over Ukraine, and then we'll get a great trade deal out of that with China. I mean, there's lots of talk about China probably having more leverage with the United States. And although Trump will sell this as a win, he started a trade war with China, and he's probably going to end it with trade, more friction in those trade relationship, and barriers to market entry, no doubt. And I'm fairly sure the end result from January the 20th to now will be a worse trade situation with China than there was, but he'll sell it as a win because it's like, look, let's put all these tariffs, terrible, and then we're going to reduce the tariffs and say that we've won. But it will be worse than it was before. A bipartisan pair of senators is looking to bring Russia's ambassador to the US before the Senate to testify on Russia's campaign of abducting Ukrainian children. That charge is a basis for a war crimes indictment against Putin, according to The Hill. Senators Lindsey Graham and Brian Schatz told The Hill on Wednesday that they were working to hold a hearing in the Senate Appropriations Subcommittee of State Foreign Operations and Related Programs on the issue of Russia's abduction of Ukrainian children. Brilliant. That sounds good to me. Do it. Just do it. Russia needs to be very clearly labeled as the bad guys and as war criminals. The ICC has done that, but the US doesn't get on with the International Criminal Court particularly. There needs to be US admission and expression of the fact that Russia is committing war crime after war crime. Now, we'll finish on the 12-point peace plan for Ukraine has been drafted by EU partners, and Kyiv proposing a two-phase process, ceasefire and negotiations. It includes the following. So, European countries prepare new peace plan for Ukraine. Radio Free Europe states ceasefire begins 24 hours after the parties accept the plan. And the contact line freezes. Negotiations begin on the contact line, which will remain in effect until parties agree on the administration of occupied territories. Security zones are formed around the contact line where no military activity will be allowed. promise of security guarantees for Ukraine. High-level dialogue is being ensured between Kiev and Moscow to, quote, enhance mutual understanding and respect for linguistic, cultural, and religious diversity. Ukraine's reconstruction is being provided through a special fund for which frozen Russian assets can be used. Sanctions against Russia are being gradually lifted as a plan is implemented, a rapid response mechanism under which all sanctions and restrictions are automatically reinstated. I think there was some claim, is it here? Yeah, some points clash with Russia's demands. So EU diplomats say the chances are slim of this getting through. So it might just be, you know, we'll put this peace plan together in the knowledge that it's very unlikely that it's going to be signed up to. But I mean, it does very much look like Russia would get away with invading Ukraine and keeping some of that land that they've stolen. Yeah, pretty sad in my books. And just finally, Anton Gerashenko often has these videos and he says, this is what we're fighting for. I'll have to pause the audio because I'll get a copyright infringement, no doubt. So just a soldier saying goodbye to his little baby there, and or toddler, I'm not sure, and just, you know, a reminder of the human cost of this war, and that on a daily basis soldiers saying goodbye to their families, and also the happy videos that we see of soldiers being reunited with their children as well. Just I thought I'd remind you of the humanity involved in war. Slava Ukraini, take care, and I'll speak to you soon.